Theology, Mary Daly. The first top box then is just, because don't forget we always do this one first before we did Rosemary Radford Ruth, so it's what is feminist theology or feminist theologians? Some feminist theologians suggest the patriarchal understanding of Christianity is mistaken and that a better, truer, non-sexist interpretation can be found. Christianity needs reinterpreting without the patriarchal elements cleansed of its distorting influences, and that Christianity is intrinsically sexist and so flawed it should be disregarded or discarded with all its sexist practices and beliefs. These are the three main views taken by feminist theologians. Theologians, again, people that study theology, study God. Mary Daly is going to argue the third bullet point, that it's intrinsically and inherently sexist and therefore so flawed it should be disregarded. Whereas Ruther is arguing more that it's just mistaken and it needs to be cleansed. So Ruther is more the first and second bullet points, whereas Daly is saying no, it is so flawed, let's get rid of it. Please don't forget to summarise as best as you can and to use the boxes that you've got available and the space available. This is a nice place to maybe start an introduction, to present different arguments, or just to be aware of the different perspectives that people do take. Box underneath, we then introduce Mary Daly. There she is. And so the next box is for that quote. I recommend that you write down that quote. If God is male, then male is God. The divine patriarch castrates women as long as he is allowed to live on in the human imagination. Brilliant quote. A little bit long to remember all of it, but still doable for certainly the first part of it. If God is male, then male is God. Link it to that biblical quote from Genesis where it says that God made them in his image. Implies that God, if it's his image, it means that God is male, and if God is male, then male is God. Look also at the language that she uses. She uses brilliant language like castrate, the patriarchy that castrates women. Very strong, very powerful language. Obviously her point there with the word castrates, because obviously castration is often used towards men, so she's using it towards women. As long as he is allowed to live on in the human imagination. Quite a Freudian idea as well with that one. So a fantastic place to start an essay, especially if you want to get that critical tone off straight away. Yeah.
What by castrates, what does she mean? Just like restricted by?
Yeah. Yeah, because obviously castration is used to mean for snipping of men, whereas she's obviously meaning like
so
in some ways restricting us or taking away our womanhood or something like that. Yeah, certainly something negative. Box underneath is split into two, just as you find on the slide. The first box goes into the first part, second box, second part. Men have, throughout history, sought to oppress women. Religion and Christianity is used as a tool to enforce this oppression with one patriarchal divine person. Patriarch, don't forget, is male ordered or male ruling. Divine person, which is God, who combines sexism, racism and classism into a three-headed monster. So Christianity has God, other main world religions, Islam has Allah, Judaism has Yahweh. So all of these are one male representative patriarchal divine person. And so not only that, but it also, she brings this idea of a three-headed monster of sexism, racism and classism. Second box, women need to get beyond religion. The biblical and popular image of God, this is a God that's a patriarch in heaven who rewards and punishes, seen as God the Father, has spawned the oppression of women. What fabulous language. Spawned the oppression. Basically meaning has created, has made spread, multiply, has just spawned this oppression of women. Daly criticised early church leaders and so-called fathers of Christian tradition for their anti-feminism. She attacked Tertullian, who was an early Christian theologian, because he saw women as the devil's gateway. What a great name for a horror. The devil's gateway, responsible for the fall and the reason why Jesus had to die for everyone. Blooming heck. Not only now are women responsible for evil, for taking the apple and taking us away from paradise, we're also now responsible for Jesus dying. So Jesus had to die for everyone because women brought in sin. And therefore we are the devil's gateway. Augustine suggests women were not made in the image of God. And Aquinas saw women as ill-conceived males. Don't forget Aquinas calls females defective. You have on Gender and Society those 3 boxes, one on Plato, one on Aristotle and one on Aquinas. And so obviously Aquinas is very influenced by Aristotle, and obviously Aristotle thought we were defective. Females were defective because they didn't have any involvement within a child. So they just thought because we don't have sperm we're therefore defective, and Aquinas got a lot of influence from that. You don't need to remember all 3 names, you can just draw upon one, that is fine. But pretty much you know what Aquinas says, you know what Augustine says about women. Tertullian's a bit different, so if you want to be a little bit different, learn Tertullian. Box underneath, oh sorry, apologies, can't miss off Martin Luther at the bottom. Martin Luther, as in Lutheranism, suggests Adam was Lord of all and Eve spoilt this. Makes them sound a bit like, oh, don't worry if you're in outer space. This makes it sound a bit like naughty siblings, that Adam had all these nice toys and then Eve spoilt it all. We then move into the next slide, which is a title I never thought I would ever type onto a PowerPoint. God should be castrated. Daly argues that we need to remove the old androcentric or male-centered language. So again, God makes them in his image, this male androcentric language. Remove God as Father and the maleness of God. Even modern-day theologians not safe from Daly's tongue. She attacks Bonhoeffer, you know, the man that went up against Hitler? Oh yes, he even can't hide from Mary Daly. She accused him of insisting that women are subject to their husbands. Is that really fair, though, when the time that Bonhoeffer lived, that was the view? The view was that men were the workers, women were at home, they were the homemakers, and the men were the rulers over the household. That was just the view of the culture. Why is she bringing it into a religious God argument? Barth is accused of claiming women are subordinate to men. Well, Barth argues that unless you find Jesus, you're going to burn in hell anyway, so whether you're a woman or not. Pope Pius XII is accused of linking women to the role of mother, not formalistic or materialistic equality with men. Pope John Paul II also links us to motherhood and virginity, so women just get stuck with mothers. Formalistic or materialistic, meaning men are in charge of all the legalities, all the material possessions, the household. They have got all the wealth, the money, the things that need some sort of intelligence. Women are just mothers. Joseph Fletcher is even accused of making a male-made theory, focusing on individualism rather than liberation of women. Oh, come on. He's been accused of making a male-made theory because he's a man. How can he make a female-made theory when he's male? Second of all, focusing on individualism rather than liberation of women. He never set out to liberate women. He set out to promote agape. If you actually promote agape, then you do kind of help women at the same time. So at this point, I think Mary Daly is just attacking as many men as possible, and most of the arguments are really unfounded on logic. Basically, the entire system of ethics and theology is the product of males, preserving a sexist patriarchal society that explicitly oppresses women. I think we've maybe had 2 females that we've studied, maybe 3. We have Philippa Foot in meta-ethics. We have Anscombe, Peter Geach's wife, that we do in Body, Mind, Soul. Oh, Body Shop Woman, Nita Roddick, yep, so businesswoman in business ethics. But very, very few. Whereas if you look at all your arguments, utilitarianism, Bentham and Mill, Peter Singer. Kant, Aquinas, Joseph Fletcher, all of these are Mill. So nearly our entire system of ethics is the product of males, and therefore, according to Daly, is preserving this sexist, patriarchal society. We then begin our 4 boxes. These boxes are part of the unholy trinity. The unholy trinity, trinity meaning 3. The 3 are rape, genocide and war. So we have 4 boxes now to do with rape. This obviously is a very, very difficult area, so please do discuss this in your exam with delicacy and consideration, because obviously this is a very, very difficult topic area, but she is bringing it in. So a good place to start as far as rape is with some definitions. Now, you don't have to write all the definitions down, but it's certainly something to draw upon. Dictionary.com says this about rape. It is the unlawful sexual intercourse or any other sexual penetration of the vagina, anus or mouth of another person, with or without force by a sexual organ, other body part or foreign object, without the consent of the victim. So what they have there is they are clearly saying that it is without consent of the victim, that it can be sexual penetration of the different body parts, and it doesn't have to be with a sexual organ. Whereas the Oxford Online Dictionary says the crime typically committed by a man of forcing another person to have sexual intercourse with the offender against their will. So again, they're talking about lack of consent there, but they are specifically saying committed by a man. Whilst they're still saying that of forcing another person. Now, this, for a definition, it's quite risky. However, statistically, rape is mostly done by men, but it might be men to men as well. So, for example, there's a lot of rape within male prisons. And so it's not necessarily that they're saying it's men of women, because it does say of forcing another person, but what both are emphasising is it's the lack of consent. However, when we actually look at the law in this country, Section 1 of the Sexual Offences Act in 2003, this is when it was last updated, or it hasn't, if it has been updated, it's been updated very minorly, so there's not massive changes. This is what it says about rape. A, intentionally penetrates the vagina, anus or mouth of another person. B, with his penis. B, does not consent to the penetration, and A, does not reasonably believe that B consents. So what this is saying is, B is not consenting, A knows they're not consenting, and they still go against, they still penetrate them with a penis, meaning again that this is male rape. It could again be man to man, but just by adding in with his penis, it also means that any other body part or foreign object would not be necessarily classed as rape, even if it was against their consent. So with this, it's a good place is to actually establish what it means by rape, because obviously we know Mary Daly is going to spin it off, and we know Mary Daly is going to talk about this in different ways that we might not necessarily first of all view rape as. So it's important to know what rape is seen as far as a dictionary definition, plus what the law recognises it as. But it is predominantly linked with men. However, this does not mean male on female. It could be male on male, but what it is not recognising, other than the first one, is female rape. What I mean by that is a female that raped somebody else. So neither does the Oxford Online Dictionary nor the Sexual Offences Act recognise is female. So the second box then, the second column, unholy trinity of rape. Mary Daly presents the ideas of rapism. This is a culture of rape. This is the symbol of all violent oppression within a society that encompasses nuclear arms race, racism, man-made poverty and ecological disaster. So basically, men are responsible and a symbol of violent oppression, not just in the case of sex, but also in the case of nuclear arms, racism, poverty and the environmental problems. Leaders of society, Daly calls them sovereigns of Sado. That's a fabulous name, isn't it? The SSS. This idea of sovereigns are masters, Sado, society, Sado, she's meaning joys giving pain to others. And so these leaders of society use culture, religion, politics, the professions and media to erase female power and oppresses them in a state of grateful dead. So you do need in your exam to engage with what it means by Sado or what she means by Sado, what you think she means by grateful dead. So they're just dead zombies, uninteracting, but they're grateful for it because of this oppression. With this, Daly isn't just attacking religion. She is looking at everything as the bigger picture. But she's saying that it all leads to this erasing of female power. And because of the patriarchy that she links to Christianity, she says that is the source. And this is not just rape in theoretical terms. Also systematic acts of physical violence towards women, so genital mutilation, foot binding, widow burning and hysterectomy. Spot the odd one out there. What she is arguing is we're not just talking about rape as in the physical act of sexual penetration. What she's also recognising is the systematic acts of physical violence and physical abuse. And so genital mutilation is absolutely horrific. The things that are done to females. But that is often a cultural thing. It's not necessarily a religious thing. And also, will she be considering their circumcision? Circumcision has come into the news quite recently again about it being genital mutilation against baby boys. And so is she considering that there? Probably not. Foot binding is again an awful practice where women have to wear extremely small shoes to crush their feet so they can't walk. Widow burning, you understand that. Whereas hysterectomy does seem like the odd one out there. Hysterectomies are often done in order to help a female. Yes, it'll be male doctors doing it. Yes, it'll probably be male doctors diagnosing it and looking and actually, But at the end of the day, often women have hysterectomies. For example, if they have breast cancer, and so they have to have the female organs removed in order to not have cancer. So often hysterectomies are done for the better of the female with their consent. Whereas genital mutilation, foot binding, etc. often isn't. Third column. It is not just men who commit rape, but armchair rapists. Remember this. Who, through pornography, are metaphorically raping women. This mentality of rape is also part of this culture of violence. Now, you obviously can't really go down it in your exam, but pornography nowadays is far more controlled and regimented. Some women actually make a very good living from it. It's very controlled, and they know what they're doing in order to make money. And so, if they are actually choosing to do it, is it still the same? And yes, there is different pornographies that are very, very brutal, etc. And obviously she might be drawing upon those. But at the end of the day, and obviously she's also assuming that there's only men that watch pornography. So this is all seeming like very unreasoned, with little evidence, accusations towards men. This culture of rape leads to sexual caste system, a hierarchy of victims, females, and dominance in sex, males. This happens through sex role socialisation, where children are constantly reinforced through schoolwork, home entertainment, adverts, interactions. So basically we are sex role socialised. You learn the role of your sex by it being reinforced in things like school. Good boy, clever girl. Adverts often have very male roles or female roles. However, adverts now are trying to change this. You'll often see things like Daz adverts with men emptying the washing machines, or you'll see the dads cooking the tea rather than it always being the mother. Did we really need to go that far though? Is it political correctness again gone too much? Did we really need to see men emptying a washing machine to know that it's not just women that do it? But then it's comments like this that make adverts and make people aware of feminism and things within society and the need to actually show that it's equal. Final box on rape. She then brings in the Bible. She's now established her argument. She's now pointing a finger at the men. She's now bringing in the Bible to back it up. Daly draws upon the example of founding judges. Scoundrels arrive at a house demanding to abuse a guest staying, and the host offers his virgin daughter and concubine. This is very, very similar to the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, where they go in and the people of the town ask to see his visitors, and he offers him his virgin daughters. So this was something that is seen in the Bible in different stories. I will bring them out to you now, and you can use them and do to them whatever you wish. They lead the daughter, but they rape the concubine to death. A concubine, don't forget, was a woman of lesser status that they can't marry, but they can still live with and have children with and have sex with. And so where we went in class was we said that is this a fair representation of that how the Bible speaks of rape? She picks out one passage. Yes, there maybe is one or two other passages in the Bible, but the Bible's a big book. She seems to be ignoring everything else. She seems to be ignoring Deuteronomy, where it says, do not rape. So she is selectively using the Bible in order to make her point. She's finding the most aggressive story she can find. Obviously, it's still in the Bible, so she's still got an argument there because it isn't like she's making it up. It is there in the Bible. However, what you also have to remember is this, again, is a cultural thing. Yes, people today still read the Bible and don't always recognise that it was written 2,000 years ago, but the culture of the time, this sort of behaviour was seen as acceptable. They fed people to the lions, for goodness sake. Final box underneath, final part of this first side, we linked it to the Indian caste system. Now, this is slightly off what we're arguing, but it's just modern day evidence of how the caste system and the classes can affect the way that people are treated. So a Dalit, meaning oppressed in Sanskrit and broken, scattered in Hindi, are terms for members of the lower castes in India, specifically untouchables, people that are subjected to untouchability. Nearly 167 million Dalits live in India. Dalit people are the bottom of a hierarchical caste system determined by birth. You are born into it through karma. 13 Dalits are murdered each week, 5 Dalit homes are burnt down, 6 Dalit people are kidnapped and abducted, and 21 Dalit women are raped each week. So this just shows again how it's evidence of certain classes or certain ways, but this again is a cultural thing, not a religious thing. And so again, you could use this for or against Daly's argument. You can use it however you wish. You don't have to use it if it doesn't work with your arguments, but it's just showing how class and the way that people are viewed really affects their treatment. Other side of your sheet, we start with the second part of the Trinity, which is genocide. You have one big box for genocide, one big box for war. Genocide then. Patriarchal possessed women lulled into the sleeping death. This is from God the Father. Such women have forgotten the reality of the gross inequality that Daly called genocide. And so we are possessed by male-dominated society, and we are lulled into this sleeping death again, this death where we're just going along with it. Daly believed there was a deep link between rape and genocide. Genocide is a deliberate killing of a large group of people. So how? How does she make this link? She says that male sexual violence forms the basis of military interest. So basically, because males have this sexual violence in them, which is why they like watching pornography to do with violence, this is why they have things to do with nuclear weapons and cause problems with the environment and everything else she blames on men, she also says that this is the basis of them having military interests. So why are females in the military? I don't quite know what she'd say about that. A raped person is no longer an individual, but is instead part of a group of raped people. So what she's arguing is that person is no longer that person. They are now a victim of rape. And because the rapist is the one that has done it to them, it is like killing off who they are. They are no longer an individual. They are just the victim of rape. It is not just an act on the individual, but an act of one group against another. That is the group of men against the women. Therefore, an expression of the dominant group, the rapists. Obviously, Mary Daly does not believe rape can happen on females to males. She is arguing that rape is done by men because of this male sexual violence. And so she's arguing that it is genocide because it is one group deliberately killing the other. By killing, she means killing who they are, killing their individualism, killing them as a person, so they are no longer a person, they are just a victim of rape. In other words, genocide happens because of the need of men for violence. This violence is linked with sex, and also rape can be seen as genocide, killing of individualism, becoming victims of rape. Second box, the third and final part of the Trinity, is war. Daly argues that there is a connection between the mentality of rape and the phenomenon of war. Oh, well, why not? We brought genocide in there, why not bring war in there as well? She identifies accounts of conflicts in which rape was a product of war, such as the hundreds of thousands of Bengali women raped by West Pakistani soldiers in 1971. So war often causes rape. She gives evidence and accounts to back this up. Throughout history, it has been known, Vikings, Romans, whoever it was, they did rape and pillage societies and communities and villages. But she's using that as evidence towards this male violence. Daly continues to point out the link between rape and war in the Bible, where Moses is enraged after a campaign against Midian because the commanders had spared the lives of all women. Now kill all the boys, this is Moses, and kill every woman who has slept with a man, but save for yourself every girl who has never slept with a man. So basically save the virgins and kill everybody else. She argues that war is an inevitable result of male-dominated politics. Daly believes that language has been corrupted when killing a human in war, when that is just, but killing an unborn fetus in abortion is unjust. This is because war is defended by phallic morality and a phallic mentality. Phallic meaning penis. So basically, men are penis-driven and have penis-driven morals and penis-driven reasoning. And because of that, it results in war. And this violence leads to rape, and that violence can start both physically or metaphorically, systematically, things like pornography. And so all of this is because of men and the way that men think. It's a real shame in a way that Mary Daly died in 2010. I think she'd have been fantastic on Twitter. I bet she'd have been an absolute menace. Brilliant, you're doing really well, everyone. Box underneath is for then the liberation of women. The box, the larger of the two is for the top box, the bubble is for the second box, the one at the bottom is just discussion questions, so you don't need to write them down. So the top box, she says that women need to seek liberation, freedom, from moral hypocrisy. How? Become radically deviant in the face of patriarchal expectation. This includes rejecting all moral standards, because these are designed by men in government to subjugate women. Also, the injustices and inequalities that oppress women are bound up in these male moral standards. And so basically she's justifying and promoting being radically deviant. And she goes further and she says this. So that the bubble goes in the second box. To be female is to be deviant by definition in the prevailing culture. To be female and defiant is to be intolerably deviant. This is equivalent to assuming the role of witch and madwoman. Because comparing women to witches and madwomen really help her argument. So she's arguing that women should be deviant and defiant against male-made rules. Basically break the law because they're made by men, and what do they know? We only have 4 boxes left.
So is she saying to assume the roles of witches and madwomen? She's saying women shouldn't be like that.
Yeah, because she's saying to be female and defiant is to be intolerably deviant, so she wants us to be like that, and she's saying that's equivalent to, so equivalent meaning the same as. So yeah, that's certainly how I would interpret it. What she will be meaning is witches were women that were accused of doing something burnt at the stake by men because of fear, and witches were never bad people. They were people that often tried to help people in society with homeopathic remedies, etc. And mad women, any woman that, I mean, if you ever go to an institution and look at historical records, often women that cried too much, had emotional tantrums, even had swelling of the abdomen, were all put in mental institutions. And so basically they were classed as mad women whenever they did something or something happened to them that people, the males in society didn't like. So that's what she's meaning there, is whereas we assume witch and mad woman as being bad things, she's arguing that's when women have been wrongly accused of things. Yeah. So what are Mary Daly's conclusions then? Jesus Christ is the symbolic legitimisation of the rape of all women and all matter. Poor Jesus. He gets crucified on a cross. He's doing it to save everybody, and now Mary Daly, 2,000 years later, is accusing Jesus of raping the whole of women. Poor man. So he is the symbolic legitimisation. So he's the symbol that allows or legitimises the rape of women. How did she draw this conclusion? Well, because the underlying culture of rape, genocide and war is impregnated within Christianity itself, and these elements are so fundamental to Christianity that leaving this culture means leaving Christianity. So basically, because Christ is the head of Christianity, and Christianity is so impregnated with the culture of rape, genocide and war, you cannot take those elements out of Christianity or out of the culture, out of the Bible. Therefore, Jesus is a rapist. Because of, you cannot separate the culture from Christianity, and therefore because this is the culture, Christianity is therefore to blame. Rather than the people that don't recognise the culture the Bible was written in and actually recognise that I'm not going to go and feed my neighbours to the lions because we don't do that anymore, just like we don't treat women like this anymore. So rather than again blaming Christianity in a 2,000-year-old text, why not blame the people that still follow it exclusively, for example? And also, does this mean leaving behind the whole of history? At the end of the day, all of history is impregnated with these things. All of history is impregnated with rape, genocide and war. So does that mean we need to take away history as a subject, for example? So it's about thinking about what she says and really taking it seriously and thinking about the implications of what she says. Spirituality experienced through nature. This is the last part of Daly's argument, then we look at the critics. The maleness of God needs to be overturned, so no more priests, which are male mothers, and traditional holy places of worship, because these are also built and run by men. Instead, we should go on quintessence, the highest essence of being, which lives, loves and creates. The spirit that permeates all nature, giving life and vitality to the whole universe, because that's not vague at all. She's saying about promoting this idea of love and creation. At the end of the day, wasn't Joseph Fletcher promoting love in agape? This idea that the spirit permeates all of nature, giving life and vitality. But isn't that what some people argue that God does? There should be a turning away from the maleness of God and the fixed nature of sacred places towards the spirit of quintessence, found in the whole universe through nature. Isn't that just a teleological argument, though? In the 1970s, there was a renewed interest in pagan spirituality and nature worship. This is reflected in Daly's work. Of course it is. This screams pagan spirituality. She probably gives pagan spirituality a bad name, really. She called women to ignore the oppressive taboos of patriarchy and connect with their wild side, embracing paganism and eco-feminist witchcraft. I really can't help but think about people, women running naked around Stonehenge or something to the moon. She really doesn't paint this picture of a particularly convincing argument here. What she's arguing here does sound quite a lot like the Gaia hypothesis. The Gaia hypothesis is very, very interesting, and it's something actually that Rose Bradford Ruther also brings in. That's the idea of the nature principle, this idea of a female goddess over nature. So there is quite a lot of links there with this idea of the Gaia hypothesis, so you might want to check that one out as well. We did when we did it in class. Second to last box, and this is when we now bring in our critics. Simon Chan. So the big box is for the box, and the bubble at the bottom is for the little bit. Simon Chan says it's not just as simple as saying God is male. He argues the Christian idea of fatherhood as embodied in the Trinity is unique. No other faith really has this idea of Trinity and this idea of fatherhood, which is embodied within Trinity, Father, Son and Holy Spirit. Daly seems to gloss over, according to Chan, the focus that God is the heavenly Father and Creator of all. He is the universal fatherhood. What he's arguing is that Daly seems to not recognise that God is the Creator of everything. God has given this to everyone. He is the universal fatherhood to all. Chan reminds us that the male language for God does not create masculine qualities for God. So, for example, in Isaiah 54, God as husband who acts with deep compassion. That's the idea that God is often talked about in very female terms, like compassionate. This doesn't make God any less male, any more female. It's just recognising that the language used isn't always predominantly masculine, like what Daly argues. And he says in Why We Call God Father, by implying that God has no feminine qualities implies the idea of a distant and impersonal deity. So what he's saying there is this idea that you're doing God a serious disservice. I don't think she really cares about doing God a disservice though. But by saying that he has no female qualities. And then instead, this distant and impersonal data sounds a bit like the prime mover. Excellent. You've done ever so well, everyone. I know this is pretty heavy stuff. Final slide. Elizabeth Schlussler Fiorenza. However you wish to pronounce her name. Should go on, Lucy. Yeah, Schlussler.
Can you just call it
Fiorenza? Yeah. I think it's her points more than anything that's important. She's a feminist theologian as well. She suggested an alternative to reading of the biblical text and sexism present in them. She argues, and this actually links in with what you said earlier, Libby, she actually argues the Bible supports women's struggles against patriarchal sexism, such as when Jesus breaks sexist customs. Jesus actually predominantly supports women. Jesus does an awful lot to help women, so then why on earth can he be said to be raping all of women symbolically as the representation when most of what Jesus taught was actually in defence of women against sexism? And so Fiorenza argues that Daly's approach is mistakenly narrow, and she uses this example. Now, you don't have to write all the example down, but you do need to know this example. So what happened in Matthew 26 is this. While Jesus was in Bethany in the home of Simon the leper, a woman came to him with an alabaster jar of very expensive perfume, which she poured on his head, Jesus' head, as he was reclining in the chair. So Jesus has a nice lean back while he's there, and someone pours perfume all over him. Thanks very much. When the disciples saw this, they were indignant. Why this waste, they asked. This perfume could have been sold at a high price and the money given to the poor. Hey, nudge, nudge, Jesus, we like the poor, don't we? So we could have sold this rather than this silly woman pouring it on your head. And Jesus, recognising this, says, why are you bothering this woman? She has done a beautiful thing to me. The poor you will always have you, but you will not always have me. When she poured this perfume on my body, she did it to prepare me for burial. Yes, Jesus, we know you're going to die, we know. I tell you, wherever this gospel is preached throughout the world, what she has done will also be told in memory of her. So what Jesus is saying is, no. My disciples, my followers will always be there to help the poor. But what this woman has done is a great blessing to me. Jesus said that because he recognised how the disciples responded to the woman. Because at the end of the day, she did waste some very expensive perfume, but she did this out of love and respect of Jesus. And so what Jesus did, recognising the way the disciples responded of, what a waste, we could have sold that for the poor, Jesus says, no, what she did is beautiful for me. You also have the bleeding woman that touched Jesus. You were never, ever allowed to touch a man that was not your own husband, certainly not in public. And rather than Jesus calling her out, he healed her. And so Jesus also was extremely close to his mother and Mary Magdalene. Jesus is surrounded and supported by women. And so why on earth can you say that Jesus is sexist or promotes sexism when actually he did quite the opposite? And that's what Fiorenza is recognising here. Are there any questions? Brilliant, everyone, very well done.